I feel like I've spoken myself into a corner here because I thought I had the answer when I started recording this, and I actually don't. Oops. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Whimsy and Metaphor Ride-Along Club. If you caught the VOD or if you caught the Twitch stream, and thank you very much for doing so either way, you will know that we just finished all of the world building. What we're going to be doing this time is we're going to be starting on the outlining process, by which I mean we're going to be starting on the outlining process next session, or next episode, I should say. Because first, what I want to do is every time I get to talk about outlining, I start to go on a couple of tangents. I've done it before. I've cut out so many big rants about this stuff in the last several episodes. So we're basically going to be talking today about the outlining process, what it is, why I do it, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the different ways that people think about outlining or not outlining, and therefore some of the things that either you might want to consider when you're doing your own project that you're writing along for this, or thinking about where I'm coming from when you are applying my advice to your writing, and which parts of it you want to keep and which parts you don't, sort of making that a little bit more explicit. So we're going to start with the argument that spawned the quite tongue-in-cheek title of this video. So there's sort of two ways to conceive about the process of going from having that story idea to starting to write it, which is this sort of section of the process we're in. And often it is framed as pantsing versus plotting, and that's the one that I think I heard earliest, and I think that it might actually be the one that was discussed first in general, but again, I'm not old enough to have been there when this particular discourse started. So pantsing at the very extreme end is sort of having your idea, having your concept, whether that is, as we talked about in that first sort of discussion, full-on premise or just the concept, whether you just have the idea and a kind of idea of where you want to start and you just go, or whether that's more what stopping at a couple of episodes ago before I started doing all that world building. That's sort of the one extreme end. The other extreme end is the plotter end. That very structured approach of having full outline, scene by scene, character notes. And you go in almost having everything about the story except the actual words. That is like hardcore plotter. At least I think as people tend to conceive of it. And you often hear people sort of talking about their reasons for being somewhere or other on this spectrum. And because, of course, this is the internet, people will see two ends of a scale and see them as two camps to put themselves into, right? So you've got people who are pantsers, and they will say that they don't plot in general. These are the most common things I see people saying online in writers' circles. These people often fall off outlines anyway. They don't want to outline because they know they're just going to change it up. There is a discovery process in the first draft for them. That's why this is also often called discovery writing. That's where the interest comes from. Then you have people in the plotter camp, and I realize I've been switching around which of my sides is pantser and which is plotter. Just go with me. You have the plotter side, who often the reason for doing the whole plotting, outlining, structuring thing is because it reduces decision fatigue during the drafting process. You don't have to make all of those decisions on the fly as you go because you've already made them. You've already got an outline. It reduces your chances of getting stuck and getting writer's block if this is the way that you work. And the other thing is it reduces your editing time. because pantsing really requires you to do a lot of editing in post to fix up your structure, to fix up inconsistencies, to fix up where you change direction in the middle of the story and didn't plan on it. So you now have to go back and add in a bunch of foreshadowing. Then, let's talk a little bit about Architect and Gardener. And the way that I saw these presented were as kind of alternatives to the terms plotter and pantser. Architect versus Gardener map generally onto an architect as a plotter, a gardener as a pantser, but I think it's actually a slightly more nuanced, perhaps, way of thinking about story construction. Because the idea is that an architect has a plan going in and builds a structure according to that plan, whereas a gardener may still have a level of planning. They are still planting seeds in certain areas. They're making sure that their tomatoes and their garlic are planted together because they are companion plants and they grow well together. They're making sure that their ideas are slotted in the right place. The gardener is directing the uncertainty and is corralling the uncertainty into a certain shape. But they are not necessarily looking for a specific intended outcome, right? They're letting the plants do what they need to do and just providing enough of a focus and a direction to know that these are weeds and they don't want them. These are things they want together. These are things they want apart. So I think Architect and Gardener is a slightly more nuanced way to think about the way that these things actually play out in real life, and because it's focusing more on that, not necessarily the difference in how much control you actually have going in, but it is focusing more on the different approach of the gardener using their control to direct as things go, to make changes during the process, whereas the architect is using their control to make their changes during planning and to ensure that their plans are solid. The fact that all of these are grouped under the heading of outline can make this question really difficult to talk about, because when you're talking about all of these different processes and structures and ways of thinking about a story, the question of whether or not you should or do outline becomes very fraught. And if you think, you should outline, well, then you get into the weeds of what you actually need to do. How much is an outlining? How much detail do you include or not include? And I think a lot of people think of an outline as like a blueprint or a clothing pattern or something of that nature, or it's a synopsis almost. But I think I have a slightly different definition which may help clarify your process. Maybe it's hubris to say this. An outline is a series of reminders to myself about what I was thinking about the story at various points, such that I can reference that outline and I know I can remind myself of thoughts and ideas that I had in the past. The same way I would go back and double check world building notes, if I kept them most of the time, about what the title of a particular ranking government was. It is essentially a series of prompts. The question when you are deciding how much or how little outlining to do is, what do you most often need prompting on? Where do you most often get stuck? And what kind of notes would help you reduce decision fatigue in the story, keep yourself flowing and keep that momentum as you're writing the story without feeling like you need to stick to something too rigid or feeling like you get a certain distance in and you throw out a whole bunch of work. So as I think is probably pretty clear by now, I think the concept of an outline is a very fuzzy one. And I think there's a big scale, sliding scale involved here, and everybody's going to fall somewhere different on it. I want to introduce the concept of a zero draft, not because I think it's a useful way to divide up that scale, I think there's a lot of overlap between a zero draft and a dot point outline or a very basic overarching outline and a full first draft. You can't sort of separate those out very clearly. You know, for example, there's the full first draft where you've got everything in place, and then a lot of people write first drafts where you've got little notes to self. Scene goes here. Here is the big climactic fight, but I'll write it later. And that's still a first draft. I wouldn't call that a zero draft or an outline. I certainly wouldn't call it an outline. But at the same time, the concept of a zero draft overlap with that concept. What I want to use the zero draft here as is it's a way of discovery writing without creating continuity issues for myself later. So the archetype of a zero draft is like the script version, where you have all of the dialogue and then all of the description and all of the transitions that, like, there's no transitions, and a lot of the description that goes around those dialogue interactions are somewhere between a reminder to self and a stage direction with some longer paragraphs thrown in if you happen to be inspired. The way I do it is not quite like that, but that is, I think, the best way to explain the basic concept of it. It's a way to get the whole work down in a way where you can see all of the connections, you can see all of the structures, you can see all of the arcs, but you aren't writing everything in detail such that if you shuffle things around or you change things structurally, you have to go back and do a bunch of rewriting, or you have to go back and do a bunch of picking up tiny continuity issues. And I think that, just like architect and gardener, is a more useful way to me of thinking about different approaches to where you put your effort in the planning process. Is it that you want a series of reminders to yourself about the details that you wanted to include? Is it you want something to reduce decision fatigue and to reduce the amount of time that you need to spend during the drafting process thinking about where to go next? Or is it something that you want to use to reduce editing later? And some combination along that sliding scale of just do a first draft, maybe write some reminders and notes to self, to do a comprehensive draft that is not complete, to write a bunch of outline notes and dot points and that kind of overarching here are your milestones kind of outline. Which of those, or what combination of those, is most useful to you in your process? So to bring us to the question that I think is going to cause the most drama in this entire series potentially, will outlining make you a better writer? And as I said, I think that's a very loaded question. No, I don't think it will. I don't think outlining in and of itself makes you a better or worse writer either way. However, there is a bias built in here that I do want to acknowledge. The place that I come from is that I believe fully and strongly that a person who thinks about the craft of writing and has some sort of iteration process, that is, they go back and edit, or they do outlines, or they plan, or they revise, whatever stage of the process that happens in, will usually turn out much better quality work than someone who doesn't. Now, that is very loaded because there is the argument there of, again, as I think I've mentioned here, this series is assuming that part of the joy of writing for you is also improving your writing craft, right? It's assuming that part of what you want to do and part of your goal as a writer is to get better at writing. Because there is nothing at all wrong with writing just for fun, because the process of writing is fun, and you want to post it somewhere online, AO3, Wattpad, whatever self-published story platform you happen to be using. I am willing to admit that there are edge cases of people who are extremely, extremely good and proficient writers who don't do that iteration process just because they are that good. I am not here to say that writing without iteration will always be worse. I'm just saying that if I were to lay money on one outcome over the other, a person who writes without some form of iteration, who then wrote something and used an iteration process, would probably have a better product at the end when they came to post it because of that iteration process. And by better in this case, I mean it will achieve the goals that they intended while writing that piece more effectively, with less words and repetition used to do so. They will be tighter, they will be more focused and concentrated, and usually they'll do it with a better arc of tension, greater emotional impact. The parts of the story that are meant to hit hard will hit harder, and that's part of it being written more tightly. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on that. Alright, but before I stop here and start to let you guys argue about this in the comments, I do want to do just a very quick run over of what this looks like when I do an outline myself, because I think doing it here will just reduce the amount of faffing around next episode, where I really do just want to get straight into it. So let me switch here. Sorry about the weird placement of everything. So this is an image of one of my other current projects that I am working on. Yes, spoilers for anyone that is interested in going into all of my writing completely blind, but hopefully there's nothing here. I think I've cut out everything that's particularly spoilery. This is chapters 11 through 16. They are in order. I haven't got them numbered because I know that I might be dragging and dropping them around the place when I finally sort of get to starting to work on these chapters. I have a title for all of them. I have a one-line summary, which is basically just for me to have some context when I'm skimming these and I'm looking for a particular scene because I need to move it somewhere, or I need to rewrite it, or I need to add something to it. And then I have a paragraph summary. That is this section on the side in the summary notes. And I will let you pause the video and read that. Hopefully this is visible enough on the screen that you can do so. But essentially what this summary is, it's a play-by-play of the scene. And the way that I sometimes describe this is it's the scene described in a voice that I would use if one of my friends on social media had asked, hey, what scene are you writing right now? There are quips to myself in some of them, there are like little asides, but mostly it's kind of just a detailed summary of this happens, this happens, this happens. This character feels like this character feels like that. This character thinks this but says this. So that I get this sense when I'm actually writing the scene of what all the motivations are, what I'm aiming for, and where I'm going. The reason that I have this written like this is it's partially as a reminder to self-prompt. It's a way of me externalizing all the thoughts about who's doing what when and what's happening in each scene and writing them down so that I don't have to spend that mental effort remembering what I was thinking. I only have to spend the mental effort thinking about how to get it onto the page. And then the other thing is, when I am done with writing this outline, I go through a structural edit, you know? But that's essentially the structure that we're going to be using for this. Note also that there is a gigantic list, so these are all in 10 scene sections, because this is going not chapters, because these scenes are going to be posted online on a week by week basis. So I'm not breaking them up into chapters, I'm breaking them up into 10 scenes by 10 scenes, and I only do that because it makes it easier to flick through and find things. Not for any particular 10 scenes are important to this story kind of purpose. It's just a way for me to make that sidebar a little less messy. So that is this episode. I'm sorry that we didn't do any actual work this episode, but I did think it was important to get a lot of these concepts out and down and done before I actually started to do the work and started interrupting myself with various tangents and things. And you have a better idea of where I'm coming from and why I'm doing things the way that I'm doing them. Next fortnight, I'm going to do start the outline process. After that, I'll probably do another stream, but the outline might take a while, so I'll probably do a lot of it either in streams or off camera. We'll see how we go. I might do the first stream, see how far I get, and then I'll update everybody on what the next episodes are going to be like. So thank you everybody for coming to watch this again. Whatever time of day it is where you are, I hope you're having a good one. As usual, links to my other social media and the Discord are down in the description. Next episode, I will talk about when the next stream is going to be. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.